computer. Yes, let's do that. Okay. So don't say anything, salacious or controversial or anything now, because you're being recorded for posterity. That's especially good for you, Jackie. Make sure.
Have it.
Hello.
Hello. Nice to meet you. Welcome to San Diego, so to speak.
Thank you very much.
She's welcoming us to UK, see, so we're able to correspond almost instantly.
Exactly. I love it. Good morning, everybody.
Oh, bunch of people waiting here.
Let people in.
Yeah, I will.
They all followed instructions. Hi,
They
Donna. Hi,
They took
John.
me at my word that
Hi,
I said
Margaret.
9:30. I don't believe it.
Good morning, everybody. Donna here.
Hi, Donna.
Hi,
How
Donna.
are
Hi.
you feeling?
I'm doing really well. Thank you.
Moving around okay?
Yeah, I'm going out with my daughters today for lunch and walking around one Paseo for Mother's Day.
Awesome.
Gonna drive tomorrow. Try it anyway.
Excellent.
Something
Thank you.
new every day.
Hi, Jack. How are you?
Good, good. Thanks.
I love
Good to
our
see you.
old group here.
Oh, it's so nice. Hi, Mary. Haven't seen you in ages.
Oh, let's put you on. Hi, this is Margaret. Yeah,
Oh.
put you on gallery so we can see. Now we can see everybody. Almost
Hi.
everybody. Where's Phyllis?
Hi, Mark.
Good to see you.
Hi,
Good to
Mary.
see you.
Mary, you're
And-
muted. Mary, you're muted.
She's a quiet kind of person.
Oh, hi, Phyllis.
Hi, how are you?
There she
How are
is.
you?
Hi, Phyllis.
Hi,
Hi, Phyllis.
good morning.
Good morning.
See.
Hi,
How many
John.
do you expect, Ralph?
Well, looks like we have 14. Well, actually,
Mhm.
one is a host and two more are the artists. So we only have 11 visitors, whatever. I'm expecting maybe a couple more, but I think we could get started. We said we'd start at 9:30, and Liz has a few things she wants to say in introductory remarks. So,
Hey. I'll
Yeah.
mute myself.
yeah.
Okay.
I'm to mute.
So I was going to say hello and thank you ever so much for inviting me here. The joys of technology is lovely to be, thousands of miles apart, but we're all on the same screen, hopefully. So my plan is that I'm going to start off just doing a few animal eyes as a sort of a bit of a warm-up exercise, but that's quite useful to do because the eyes are so important in any sort of portrait, and if we get those wrong, actually we've got the whole painting wrong. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to move on to painting some mallards, and we'll take it from there. And if anyone wants to ask any questions, please do. I think the idea is to put it in chat and Ralph's going to read it out. Is that right?
Yes, but I also have a question about the eyes. Let's say you're doing an animal with eyes, and do you typically start with the eyes and then do the rest of the creature?
I do, on the grounds that if I muck up the eyes, I've mucked up the whole painting. So, and also if you start with the eyes, then it's easier to get them actually sort of embedded into the animal's skull, because what you don't want it to look like is sort of buttons sewn on afterwards. So some people do them right at the end, but I think that's putting a lot of pressure, because you get to the end and you're thinking, oh, I like this painting, oh yeah, it's going well, and then you muck up the eyes, you've wasted a couple of hours. Whereas if you do it first and they don't go right, you can just turn your piece of paper over and you've only wasted 10 minutes, which so yeah, always start with the eye.
Thank you.
Hi,
Yeah,
Liz. I had one more question, Ralph. Could we see a quick picture of what we're going to do if you have a completed one?
Yeah, excuse me. I mean, this was just a rough one from sort of yesterday when I was just sort of warming up. So we're going to do sort of three mallard ducks, very sort of loose and a bit splishy splashy, and go from there. That was the plan.
Right.
Sorry, can you
Liz,
see that?
Could you just mention your palette and watercolors you're using, please?
Yeah, I will. Shall I start with the eyes and then I'll come on to, yeah, I'll go through all the colours, the whole thing. So don't worry, I'll do that.
Is there a way to put it so we can see your palette when, or your,
Yeah,
there.
if we've got space, I can pop it there. Obviously, I might have to move things around, but yeah. No problem at all. So, let's say what I wanted to do, and I've just got a little reference sheet there, was just take you through, I reckon there's sort of three main sort of types of animal eyes. The very simple ones where they're quite small in the animal and it's literally a dark circle with a highlight. So something like we'd see in this Canada goose. Then we've got sort of, again, there's no visible pupil, but they're just a bit bigger in the animal, a bit more complex. So like in this tawny owl. And then where you've got a visible pupil, whatever shape that might be. So like we've got in the cat. So if I sort of take you through those, just in sort of 15, 20 minutes, and then we'll get on with the ducks. But it's just quite useful because I think, to say, the eyes make or break an animal portrait. And therefore sort of getting used to them and enjoying doing eyes, because I meet a lot of people who are quite scared of using painting eyes. So, you know, if you do a bit of practice, they suddenly become really easy, especially in watercolour, because watercolour is such a gorgeous fluid medium. It's full of light, so it's just perfect for eyes. So I'm not going to use realistic colours here. I'm just going to use any colours that sort of come to hand, to a certain extent. It's just because I've got the colours out that I was planning to use for our ducks. I'm just going to mix up a bit of a dark mix. So I'm putting a bit of purple, that's diox purple, and this is a bit of quinacridone yellow, which I'm mudding up terribly here, just mixed together to make a dark mix for us. And if I sort of start off with the goose, and I've just got a small size 8 round brush. I mean, a goose's eye is literally a circle with a little highlight left. And then if you look, they sort of have, often they have sort of membranes round that just, you know, catch the light. So leaving that little sort of circle. In fact, I can hear my cat at the door. Sorry if I sounded distracted there. The cat's meowing at the door. I shall not let it in because she'll jump on the middle of the painting. So I really like to use a lot of water in my work to let the colour flow and to really use that sort of wet in wet. So I use the water and just pull the paint out of that little eye, and then say we've got the markings around here. And you might, you know, drop in a bit of extra colour if you want. You know, you need to sort of darken places. But by letting the water do the work, can you see that lovely line that we've got over the top there? That's just sort of watercolour moving through. And then again, this is meant to be clean water, but my brush is a bit mucky. But, you know, you can just paint with the water and let the colour follow that path. Now, I'm sure I don't need to tell you that because you're all watercolourists, but I just think it's always worth thinking about how the water can do more of the job for us.
Liz, is your board flat or angled?
It's flat at the moment. Usually I would paint with it at a slight angle, sort of, you know, 5 degrees, but I've got it flat just to make it easier for you guys to see it. So if it puddles a bit, then I will obviously start to move it around if I need to. But can you see how much water's on there just by the way the paint's moving?
I think it's amazing with just a few strokes.
Yeah, but that's the joy of watercolor. It's it sort of does it for you, thank goodness. So I say this sort of very simple eye is literally a circle with a little highlight. And then if we move on to say the owl's eye, which is just a little bit more complex. I mean, it's pretty much the same idea in that it's, let's leave that highlight. You can't see a pupil there. But just always look at the shape. It's really important with eyes just to look at the placement as well, because where the eyes are in the head is really important. So here I'm just putting a little circle of water round the corner, not round the corner, around the outside. And then if I bridge that gap, you can see the colour starts to sort of move along. And I've just left those sort of that little white line as the membranes of sort of around the owl's eye. And then you might start to pull away, again, just with a wet brush, pull away in the direction of the feathers and let some of that paint start to flow out and follow, and you would sort of start to develop those sort of brush marks. But that looks really flat at the moment. So I'd like a thirsty brush. So I'm taking the moisture off and just doing a really soft highlight. And just by sort of doing that sort of highlight, can you see how it immediately makes it far more of a ball, just to bring a little gloss and shine to that eye. And then I would just, you know, if I was doing this as a proper painting, I would start to drop in different colours. And the joy of mixing your darks, say if I put some purple in there, you know, you can sort of start, and we'd come down here towards where the beak is. I mean, the beak's down here, so we won't go that far. But again, it's just letting that water do a lot of the work for you. But that little soft highlight there is just enough to sort of bend the eyeball round, which is lovely. And then if we come on to say a slightly more complicated eye, where we can actually see the pupil, we do need to sort of work in layers. So I'm just this is a bit of gamboge that I've got lurking in my palette. So I would do the same thing again. And I paint right over where the pupil would be so that you don't end up with a little, you know, white lines between the iris and the pupil. And again, I like to use that thirsty brush and just pull out that sort of soft highlight. But it's fun to drop in some colours around the edge to let it sort of feather through. And you might need to sort of encourage some of that if needs be, just with your brush. Again, because you get those lovely flecks, and I'll just encourage those in. Those beautiful flecks that you get in the iris. And then, just as we did before, working round, being a bit careful because obviously this is quite wet at the moment. And I don't want to, oh, I've got a wobbly hand today. And just sort of pulling that colour away and stroking the animal. And I actually quite like it when some of the pupil colour comes off into the fur. I just think it makes it more interesting. So I'm doing this very quickly, so it's a bit rough, but I hope you're getting the sort of impression of what's going on. I'd need to let that dry. I'll just tidy that up because that is messy. Can I just hairdry that? I think Zoom tends to block out the noise, so I'll just dry that if I may. And then again with your dark mix, just need to really observe where your pupil is. This is still, sorry, this is still a bit wet. Because usually you don't want the pupil to spread. And the final thing I would do is really observe carefully, because often behind the highlight, you can actually see a tiny bit of that pupil sort of often has a pale blue behind the highlight, and that just gives a lovely sort of round liquid eye. And of course, once this is dry, you can go and strengthen and sort out any bits that are a bit mucky. But just as a sort of principle of how to do animals' eyes and let that watercolor run, I hope you can see that there's sort of lovely glow to it, and watercolor is just beautiful for animal portraits. So I hope that made sense.
Very impressive.
And then, you know, we can start to think, right, how are we going to work? And our duck's eyes are terribly small and things, but it's using that principle of getting, you know, some nice juicy colour down, and then letting the water do the work, and letting the colour move through the water is what I really would want you to take away from today. So the way I paint is very loose, and I try to get probably 85% done in the first layer, let it dry, then adjust things where I've gone wrong or I'm not happy, and then probably the final 5%, yeah, so 85% in the first layer, 10% in a little second adjustment, and then probably only 5% at the end for detail. So I am not going to do every feather on this duck. I am not going to do every hair on a dog. It bores me. So I'm afraid I tend to be a bit more sort of splishy splashy, but I hope get the character, you know, of the essence of the animal.
Liz?
But okay.
Rebecca has a question. Is there a particular shape you use for the highlight in the eye?
No, I observe really. I mean, I've got this little sheet here that I've used before. So I just look and see, I mean, say on the goose's eye, let me hold that up because it's quite small. There is just a tiny, very sort of circular highlight there. Whereas on this owl, it must be inside, and it's actually got a bit of a window reflected in it, but I've just simplified that for demonstration. And say on the cat, it's very triangular, and I actually moved it over so it did go across the pupil because I wanted to just show how the shadow of the pupil is behind it. So I tend to simplify the highlight, but you observe what's going on, or indeed make the highlight how you want it to be. You know, if that's a real feature of the study, then I would make the highlight more complicated. But if, you know, if you were painting the whole of, say, that goose, then, you know, a tiny little fleck of white's all you need. And if you lose your highlight, don't panic. You know, at the end, you could either use a little bit of opaque gouache, or even use a very sharp knife and just take out a little sort of bit of the paper to reveal the white underneath. So there's an awful lot you can do without sort of panicking.
Thank you.
I've just seen a question saying, should the highlights be similar in each eye? If you're doing two eyes, so say we were looking at this owl here, well, owl or the cat, where there are two eyes, it's really important to make one slightly more important than the other, because if they're both very equal, like on this owl, we wouldn't know where to look ourselves. So I always make one slightly more dominant. I don't mean bigger, but just a little maybe crisper or slightly different color. And I always make sure that the highlights make sense together, because here we've got a different highlight in each eye and it would just look wrong on a painting. So I would make sure that that the highlight is sort of equal. You know, from this side, I would actually move that little highlight over to the left because it would look wrong on a painting. So always play around with what you're doing. That was one I've done before in a bit sort of slower time, but you can just see how in a very short amount of time, not using many colours, you can really get interesting and very lively, full of life eyes, because you want them to be liquid, you want them to be, you know, winking at you rather than sort of, as I say, sewn on buttons is what we're trying to avoid. So is that okay? And shall I move on to our little trio of ducks?
Yes, let's proceed.
I'm just disappearing again to pick up. So I think you all got a copy of that reference photo. I use a website called Pixabay, which I expect lots of you have come across, but it's a lovely reference site because everything's royalty free, they're high resolution, there's a million photos. So if you want animals, you can find them, you want landscapes, you want whatever. It's a brilliant site. So if you haven't used it before, I highly, highly recommend it.
What is the name of the site, please?
It's called Pixabay. Let me write that. Pixabay.com. Oops. Fantastic. So it's, put that there. Say it's got about 1 million photos on it, and you just search for what you're looking for. So if I put in ducks, it will come up with 3,000 ducks for me. And yes, you have to trawl through to find the right one you want, but you can then just download and it's free to use. So it's a fantastic resource, because obviously you've got to be careful of the copyright of photographers. And I'm an appalling photographer. It's not a skill of mine. And much as I love sketching from life and would aim to do that, again, with a lot of animals, they're not going to hang around for me to draw them. So we have to rely on photos.
Just to comment on that issue, we've been going around, I'm a member of the Western Federation of Watercolor Societies here in the United States. And there's been a number of members who've been very concerned about originality in artwork. And so they're pushing a provision of the entry prospectus that it only be original images, either taken by you yourself as a camera person, or you know, drawn from nature, or some other sort of thing. So this would not be acceptable in a competition like that, just for your all's information.
Well, I mean, because what I'm going to say partly is about originality, that I don't just want to paint a photo, I want to interpret it. But I do think, I mean, we've certainly got to respect photographers' copyright, because they are very skilled. I mean, I guess every society has its own rules, and I belong to a website that's called Paint My Photo, and it kind of does what you would expect it to with a name like that. You know, photographers put their stuff on there so you can paint it. But I've seen artwork and I think, oh, I know where they got that from, because I can recognize it, you know. So I think you do have to be really careful to what you choose as your reference and how you interpret it, and you need to bring your own sort of personality and interpretation to it.
Yes.
So I mean, so I say this came from Pixabay, this particular one, but because I want to make it my own, I also found this photo, which I thought was really lovely, of the duck coming towards us. And I found another one because I thought it showed the colours really beautifully. And I will do this quite often, is put photos together in compositions to exactly get around that problem of someone going, oh, I recognise those ducks, because I don't want that. So I always sort of recommend that you do a thumbnail sketch before you start. And by thumbnail, I mean, literally, it's rough as anything. It doesn't have to be anything beautiful, because apart from in a sort of demonstration like this, no one is going to see your thumbnail. But it just helps you think, right, where are the problems? What do I need to do here? Where's the light? Whatever. So, I mean, usually my thumbnails are a tad better than this, but I want to introduce this duck sort of coming forward. And I need to sort of look where that's going to go, and just look, because its head's coming towards me. So it's sort of, I've got some foreshortening and emphasis here. So I'm looking at my composition and thinking, yeah, I want to overlap these birds so that they're all linked. I want the emphasis maybe to be on the head of this duck coming forward. And I'm looking at the shapes, because these ducks have got really weird shaped bodies, especially these ones. I mean, they're quite, you know how a duck sort of waddles, but these are, I really want that feeling of the waddle, but they have got some very strange things going on. So I'm looking at this one at the back with this sort of breastbone here. And I mean, maybe actually I could, stick the head of this one on, because I think it's actually a bit of a nicer shape. So I will often work from 2 or 3 different photos, taking the bits I like and obviously neglecting and throwing away the bits I don't like. For exactly that reason, as I say, I don't want, no one else will have these 3 ducks put together in the whole world, I hope. I actually preferred the feet of this one to the feet of that one, because it's sort of on its tiptoes here and it looks a little deformed. So I like the fact on this one that they're turned in, and he's sort of, yeah, pigeon-toed. Well, I was going to say pigeon-toed, and then I thought that was inappropriate for a duck. Duck-toed.
No pigeons are listening to this.
Oh, no pigeons were, no feelings going to be hurt in making of this painting. So I would encourage you to always do a thumbnail sketch, because it's your roadmap, and you know that with watercolour, once things have gone a bit wrong, rescuing them can be kind of tricky. We were talking before everyone got here about, acrylics. Well, you've got the joy of being able to kind of rescue acrylics an awful lot more than watercolour. So, a bit of a plan, thinking what's important, what don't I like, will just save you heartache. So, I mean, maybe looking at where your light is, making a decision. These 2 have got very distinct shadows from their bills sort of on their chest. Do I want to put that in? Probably I don't actually, but I do want the lighting to be consistent. So, that would be a shadow, be shadowed sort of under its belly here. And this would be shadow, that would be more shadowed. So even that sort of rough thumbnail sketch is enough to give me a little bit of a plan of where I'm going. So that I don't sort of suddenly hit some horrible problem halfway through and think, oh, I wish I'd done that. Because actually maybe it'd be quite nice to have some lost edges between these two ducks so that they actually merge into each other a bit. So that would help the focus to be more on this front one. I quite like lost edges in colour. And, you know, maybe I want to have some soft edges with this sort of just going away to show its sort of featheriness. I'm a bit sad I can't see their tails at all because, of course, mallards have those gorgeous little sort of curly tails like that. But if I stuck a curly tail on there, I'm not sure it would look right. It would look a bit mutant because the tail is actually sort of behind this duck there. So I wouldn't do that. But you can think about it and you can work out what your problems are and what you want to do with them. And far better to do that on this, you know, it's just a piece of printer paper. Do it on there rather than do it on your gorgeous piece of watercolour paper. So I would say always do a thumbnail sketch, just to get your eye in, work out what the problems are, and you know, where is your focal point? And you know, it's here for me on that face. Have I put it? Are you familiar with the rule of thirds? The rule of thirds suggests that your focal point should be where a third line crosses. So my focal point is in the wrong place. So I could, if I wanted to, maybe move this duck a bit this way so that I've got a better focal point and it's more in keeping with the rule of thirds there. And as I say, so much better to do that on a piece of rough paper than to rub out your pencil lines on your watercolour and paper and scuff up the surface and get fed up and decide to do something else instead. And then when you've got your plan, it's a jolly good idea to actually keep it to hand. I quite often run workshops and I say to people, oh, did you do a thumbnail? And they say, oh yeah, Liz, I did. And I say, oh, where is it? And oh, in my bag. And it's like, well, no, that doesn't really help, does it? You know, it doesn't mean you can't deviate from your plan, because if something nice and unexpected happens, you can of course deviate and go off in that direction, but it just gives you a bit of a starter. So that's my thumbnail. And then I need to think about colours and what sort of colours that we might want to use. And again, I like to plan my colours. I like to use one of these daisy wheel palettes because it forces me to actually plan my colours in advance. The danger of having a lovely watercolour set with, you know, the pans, you've got 24 or 36 colours in there, and you end up using 24 or 36 colours in your painting, it will not make it better. It will make it a bit of a dog's dinner. Whereas maybe 6 or 7 colours will actually end up far more harmonious. And it doesn't mean your painting will be boring. It just means it will hang together. So I usually use 2 colours. And I use every brand that's going, to be perfectly honest. I love Daniel Smith's colours, absolutely gorgeous, but I don't know if they're hideously expensive in America, but in the UK, they are extortionately expensive. So I tend to only choose a couple of Daniel Smith's colours that I really love. I use quite a lot, SAA is called the Society of All Artists, and they do their own brand. So they are artist quality colours, but they're probably a third the price of the Daniel Smiths. So for standard colours that I can't, you know, that are okay, I will use those. This is a Sennelier, which is a French brand. Very lovely watercolours. They use honey in their watercolours. So that's that. Rembrandt, I think, is Dutch. I don't know. I should know that. Yeah, Dutch. So Netherlands. Again, it's just gamboge from Rembrandt is the most beautiful colour. So I really mix and match, because you have M. Graham, don't you? That's an American brand, which we don't get over here very much, but their colours are very beautiful.
How about Winsor Newton?
Yeah, sometimes certain colours. So which I'm trying to think, their Pereline Green is gorgeous. So I'd like that from Winsor Newton. I tend to end up having my favourite colours from each individual sort of manufacturer, and you just find which ones you really like, and some you just reject. Or, you know, French ultramarine is pretty much the same wherever you get it from, so I would tend to get an own brand of French ultramarine, whereas say something like Moon Glow from Daniel Smith, only Daniel Smith does that. Or, you know, this quinacridone sienna, only Daniel Smith does it, so that's what I have to have. But I use De La Rowney, I use Winsor, I use anyone, and I also use whoever's on sale as well. Because you're just, you know, I've got a lot of tubes of paint. I would hate to have to replace them all, so I tend to, yeah, use whatever comes to hand, whichever catches my eye. But let me show you some of these colours. So I selected this gamboge, which I say is from Rembrandt, and when it comes out of the tube, frankly, it looks horrible. Let me hold that up. You know, it just looks a bit like, sorry, I was going to say baby poo, but you know, it's just not great. But as soon as you add water, look at that. It's a beautiful transparent yellow, and I reckon that would be lovely for these duck's bills. I have got the Quin Sienna. Ooh, I'll just put a tiny dot. A new tube I treated myself to. And I mean, again, that's just such a beautiful colour. I love transparent watercolours rather than the more opaque. I have got a Quin Gold here, which I thought I might dot around. Again, Quin Gold from Daniel Smith's is a beautiful colour, but this Quin Gold's not bad. It's a very strong, so I've got lots of lovely options there. I have got a bit of the Diox Purple, because I'm going to mix in fact, let's put it over here. I know that Diox Purple with Quin Gold makes most beautiful, rich, purpley brown, which I think would be perfect for the colour on this duck's chest. So that is the purple and the Quin Gold. So that will be beautiful. And then I've got some phthalo green, which of course will be beautiful for its head. And I've got a bit of Prussian blue. So I reckon that will be a pretty good duck's head. What else have I got? I've got a little bit of permanent rose here, because I do need there's a bit of rose in the feet, so that will be good. And then I've got a bit of green gold as well, and I might end up putting a bit of green gold into the head. That might be quite jolly. All those colours together for the head would be nice. But the other good thing, if I need to, the green gold and the purple mixes to give a pretty convincing dark. No, that's not a good way of showing you. But the purple and the green gold isn't a bad mix for mixing darks. I do like to mix my own darks rather than using, say, a tube of lamp black or something, because black or Payne's grey or any of those tend to be they flatten and deaden your painting a bit. So I'd much prefer to paint my, or mix colours from the palette to make the darks that I need. So thinking about complementary colours, purple mixed with yellow, blue mixed with orange, and so forth. So those are the colours that I plan to use. I think I've shown you them, yeah. And I think, you know, they're all lovely and transparent, and I think we can have a lot of fun with those, you know. And I also love the way that when you're just playing around with the colours, sometimes you know, accidentally, like this green gold is going into the purple, and you just sort of start to see the colours sort of play with each other. And now because I had water on my brush, I'm just seeing those lovely blooms forming there. And that would make me think, oh, wouldn't that be fun for creating feathery marks in the chest of these ducks? And obviously that purple is going to behave really well for making water blooms happen. Because the water blooms, of course, do you call them blooms? Sorry, do you know what I mean? Or do you call them flowers? Yeah, sorry, I know we've just got some different sort of terminologies, but you know, if, again, they form very nicely in the Prussian blue. They can be a pain if you're doing a beautiful summer sky, but if you're wanting to create a feathery texture, they could be perfect. So, you know, let's use that property potentially. So I'll put that to one side.
Liz, we have a couple of questions from the audience here.
Thank you.
One is, do you have a favorite dioxine purple?
It is this Sennelier one. It's just gorgeous because it's so rich, and with that little bit of honey in it, the flow is beautiful. So yeah, if you look at this poor tube, you can see that I've used quite a bit of it.
And could you send me an email that lists the colors that you're using in this demo so that I can feed it back to the audience?
Yes, yeah, I can even, I mean, I've written them on here, so I could even take a little photo and just email that to you, no problem at all.
Thank you.
I am going to write that down because my memory is not what it should be. So I'm just going to say email colours, because otherwise I'll get to the end of this and I'll think, oops, you know, I promised to do something and I won't be able to remember what it was. So should I forget, please nag me.
We'll stop payment on your PayPal.
Well, that's a little harsh. Yeah. So I have sketched out my ducks. Now they're quite light, so you might struggle to see them. So I've got a sheet of, this is actually £200 cold pressed watercolour paper. I sometimes use £140, sometimes I use 200. If I'm doing a larger piece, and this is half a sheet of watercolour paper, which is what, 22 inches by, sorry, I can only think of it in centimetres. Anyway, it's a half a sheet of normal watercolour paper.
Who's the maker of the paper?
This is Bockingford, which is a British paper manufacturer. So it's an archival paper, but it's not cotton, it's a cellulose paper. A lot of people are a bit sniffy about always using 100% cotton paper. I personally find Bockingford a really good tolerant paper. You can really abuse it and it won't sort of go silly on you. And it's pretty economical, so again, you can buy a big pack of it and that encourages you to experiment. Whereas if you buy, I don't know, a sheet of Fabriano and it's cost, I was going to say it's cost £15, which what would be that $22, $23 for a sheet, it makes you be a bit too careful because you think, oh, I don't want to muck this up. Whereas if you bought something that's only cost, you know, $4 or $5, fine. If it goes wrong, you can just recycle it. you know, it doesn't matter. And so I really like Bockingford, but I don't think you get it in America, I'm going to say.
I haven't seen it. We have
No.
another question. Is your palette porcelain, and who makes it, if possible to know?
Yes, it is porcelain. I haven't a clue. Sorry, I'm going to look on the bottom. No, there isn't anything. I don't know.
I don't think it's critical.
No, just a daisy wheel porcelain palette. I much prefer a porcelain palette to a plastic one, because obviously on the plastic your colour sort of beads up on it. But if I'm out and about going to workshops, I do always use a plastic palette simply because of the weight. And also I remember going to a demonstration and I was really happy with how my piece, usually I hate what I do when I do demonstrations, but this particular one was going okay. And I thought, oh, I'll take my paints home and I'll finish this at home. And I put the palette on top of my car as I was loading the car. And of course I drove off with it on top of the car and it smashed all across the car park. So yes, when I go out, I use a plastic one. But there you go. So I have off screen, I have my little thumbnail, so I've got my sort of plan going on. I'm not going to be able to fit, I'll try to fit as much on as possible, but I think we might struggle to have, you know, reference and so forth. So I'm right-handed, and therefore it's a really good idea to start on your left to avoid smudging. That's not always possible, but on this one, I think that would be good because these are less important and I can work forward to the one that is my focus here. If I'm working on a bigger piece of paper, I mean, I may well end up cropping this down to sort of bring it in tighter, but I often will leave and work on a bigger piece of paper because it lets me paint more freely. And also, if something happens that's nice and unexpected, say, I don't know, some beautiful marks started over here, well, I could always crop off this side and just shift the focus if I need be. Or say this duck goes totally wrong and is hideous, well, I could always crop it off like that and just have two ducks. So working on a bigger piece of paper does give you some flexibility with cropping at the end and deciding how you want your picture to look. So say, even if I was planning on only doing, say, that size of painting, I would probably still work on a big piece of paper and then just sort of cut it down at the end, which I know is a bit wasteful, but I think the benefits are there. So this is the moment of truth, whether you can see whether I can actually paint or not, which is a bit scary. So what I'm going to do is mix up that dark I was saying about. So I'm going to take some of my Diox purple, and a lot of the time I will just mix the colours on the surface, but because I know I'm going to be using quite a lot of this, I am going to mix up a nice creamy sort of puddle of it. I have got some kitchen towel to hand because I'm making a right mess of my poor Quinn Gold here already. And if I need to test out any of my colours, you know, I can just test on a piece of paper. See, that is too purple still, so I need to add in more Quinn Gold here just to get a nice sort of rich brownier colour. So I've got that mixed up. And I tend to, sorry, try and clean my brush here. I like to mix up my colours so that they're all liquid and ready to go. I don't tend to mix the whole lot up because say I needed a slightly more concentrated colour, I could go back to that sort of dry bit there, but I do mix them all up so that I can work quickly because I like to work wet in wet, and you know, things will dry quickly, and you haven't got time to mess around sometimes. That's the green gold there, which is really such a beautiful colour. Actually, Winsor & Newton make the most gorgeous green gold. That isn't Winsor & Newton, but it is. Winsor & Newton is probably my favourite green gold. I might treat myself to that. And I have slightly run out of mixing dishes, so I have just got a spare little one if I need to. I might want to mix up a dark, so we'll see. So those are all there. I've also got a nice little spray bottle in case I want to use that. And I've got a stash of brushes here. I'm conscious I'm using quite a little brush at the moment, and I guess that's partly not nerves as such, but you know, I'm conscious that you're watching me, so that gives me some sort of sense of control. So actually I probably need to use a larger brush because it's easier to paint loosely with a larger brush. It stops you sort of fiddle-faddling too much. I've also got that quill brush, which is nice, and I have got a little rigger. Do you call these riggers?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, good. Okay, the rigger, if I need that. I mean, I have got a couple of smaller detail brushes, should I need that. But on the whole, I reckon you only need 3 brushes to be able to paint pretty much anything. You know, a decent size round, sort of middly sized round, and a rigger, and that should be enough. But say I've got a few others just to hand if I need them. So I am going to start with the beak on this bird, and I'm using the gamboge, which has got a bit dirty, but that's probably a good thing. And just as I showed you with the eyes, I put the sort of colour down and then use clean water to sort of shift the colour around on the surface so that it has chance to flow, leaving those all important little white areas. I'll come back to the sort of dark mark that it has on the end of its bill when this is dry, because if I do that now, it will spread everywhere. So I've left space here around its nostrils because there's a little sort of raised area around the nostrils. And we've got that in there. I might just drop a little bit of the pink in and just let that spread and go for a little walk. And to be honest, don't need an awful lot more for that bill at the moment, because I can always come back when we put the nostrils in. Gee, if I just pull that down, that will give me a bit of a place to put the nostrils in a moment. So then I'm going to do, I said I always started with the eyes, and I'm waiting for someone to say, you didn't start with the eyes, but I am going to do them sort of early on. And on this duck, you know, the eye is very, it's, you know, insignificant. So I'm going to come round, this is meant to be clean water, not terribly clean, but just come round and start to drop colours in and let those colours go for a bit of a wander. That's the green is the phthalo green, which is absolutely beautiful. It's very strong though. It's a really dominant colour. And the only trouble with all the colours I love, they're very staining colours. So if this goes wrong, I haven't really got any chance to lift these colours or do much with them. So let's hope it doesn't go wrong, eh? It might. And if it does, then I will have learnt from it, and that's just life, isn't it? So I do think you need to have quite a realistic sort of attitude. When you paint loosely, there is more opportunity for things to get a bit out of control and for it not to end up quite how you want. So, well, if that's the case, that's the case. Just going back in and dropping in sort of deeper colours, because when you're diluting it on the surface, things can get a bit pale, and we don't want that pale. This eye looks terribly cut out at the moment because that circle round it is complete. So if I just bridge that gap and tidy it up, that just will make it look a little bit better. It maybe a little bit of a shadow under there. I think that tone is infinitely more important than colour, but because this duck has got such gorgeous colours, we will use that. Okay, and then I'm going to, most mallards have a beautiful white ring around their neck, and you can't particularly see it on this photo. You can see a bit of that white mark there, but not on this one. But I know it's there, and therefore I'm going to put it in because I want to. So again, that goes back to our conversation about making something your own. You know, if I want a white ring around its neck, I'm jolly well going to have one. I just need to be careful here because this beak is wet. So again, I've put some colour down, and this clean water pulling it away, and I always make the brush marks go in the direction that the feathers are growing or the fur's growing. So if I end up, say, with some of these white marks where it's skipped, they will look plausible, rather than if I sort of say did it up and down, it would look really weird. But I am going to just bridge this across just to break up that little white area. And then I'm going to drop some extra colour in here so that that can sort of go for a walk and a play. And I think it might be quite nice to put either put some salt into this area to sort of create some kind of really nice textures, or as we discovered when we were doing those swatches, I could wait till this is virtually dried and then drop some water in it to encourage lots of blooms. So down sort of here is all kind of just a bit of, well, it's not really a colour of anything, it's a sort of lighter shade of the colour that we've got in its chest. So I'm putting clean water here, and I will need to go and change my water shortly, because when I say clean water, it's not. Sorry, and I was going to say I'm going to let some of this colour move and travel down, but I did that rather too quickly. So then you start to get these lovely, interesting marks, and I can watch watercolour move around all day. I just love sort of looking at time lapse of watercolour moving because it's just so beautiful. And you couldn't get that sort of lovely sweep of colour if you with a brush or anything. So you just have to let the water do its thing and try not to fiddle, which of course is so hard. I'm going to sort out that shape up there because he's gone a bit mutant. And then I will change, oh, sorry, my voice is getting very croaky, excuse me. Just take a glug. Always being careful not to drink your paint water. I'm just going to change to a slightly smaller brush and then come down into those legs. So I'm going to use a bit of that Quin Sienna. And I don't know if you've ever spent any time sort of staring at a bird's legs, but they're quite sort of scaly. So we can just sort of give an indication. And then, in fact, that brush is probably still a little bit big. Let me use one of my little pointy brushes, or they've got sort of scales over their toes. So it's nice to play with different sort of marks, just to add variety, because you're trying to sort of give the viewer sort of something to look at and get those, again, get some of that colour to sort of mix. And then sort of between the marks, it's plainer. So if I do that now, some of that colour from the little marks over its toes will sort of merge in, I hope, and go into the webbing. And then if I use a bit of darker, they've got, again, I don't know if you've ever looked at a duck's foot. They've got real claws on the ends of their toes, so we can do that and let that move in there. I think it's a little bit more red, well, so that was that permanent rose that I had would be quite nice. And if some of that could travel up into the body, there's a real reflection from that light. So the underside of the body is actually quite orange. That had dried. I'm working in my sort of conservatory at the moment and it's really hot in here. So that had dried. So I just put in a little water just to encourage that to move. And I'm just putting a little but same dark purpley mix just to give a sort of bit of shadow and a bit of shape to that. And again, I could sort of pull that up a bit more. Painting wet like this, it's worth always going back and just seeing being aware of how things are drying. So it is drying quickly, so I need to just dot in some clean water to try and get those little cauliflower marks coming on. So that was just some clean water into that drying wash. And look, we've got those beautiful little marks, which will be lovely for feathers. So again, just letting that water do its own thing. This beak has got very pale, but I think I will come back at the second layer and work on that colour and just strengthen it up, because that beak is really getting a bit pale against that. And if I try to do anything with it now, there's a real danger that I will, you know, just end up with a bit of a mushy mess, which is not what we want to do. But do be aware of what's happening. Just because I'm working down here means, you know, I still have to be aware of what's going on there. I'm splashing everywhere, but luckily I really like splashes, so that doesn't matter. So it's got a beautiful raised foot. If you look, it's taking a step here, which is so nice. So I really want to capture that sort of strange sort of pose. So I'll do those little sort of lines across coming down that raised toe. And there's a little, the other toe is sort of along here. And then we can see a little bit of its foot back, or sorry, leg, I should say, back there. So just get that in there. And then just with clean water again, just coming and putting that webbing in so it can merge there. Maybe a little bit of sienna. And then again, getting its little claws in at the end while it's still wet, so that again, that can sort of merge as needs be. Might be worth thinking about, as this is drying, whether we want to soften off any edges. I talked about on my plan whether maybe trying to merge these and get a bit of a lost edge. So I might just use my water bottle here just to soften that off, so I can get a soft edge there if I want to. But actually, I'm rather liking some of those marks. So I might, she says, there's quite a lot of fluid there, but if I sprayed up here and let some of that bleed off, can you see I'm using my hand just to make sure that it doesn't all go too mushy? But you know, those are beautiful marks. And I think we could encourage those now. And when we come back, we can start to make that into the background. I think water bottles, spray water bottle is a very undervalued tool, and I can think of so many uses for them. So if you don't use one, I really would encourage you to. This beak is now dry enough. I reckon I can come back and put its little nostrils in. And we've got that lovely mark that it has on the end of its beak. That looks a bit too clunky, so I'm going to soften off again and just sort of, just with a clean brush, just connect that through so it doesn't sort of stand out so much. And in fact, it's got a little highlight that I should have probably put in, so I'll lift a bit of that off just to make that a bit better. And it's just started raining here. We had a beautiful sunny day, and I'm hoping that my husband remembers that the washing's on the line because it's just started raining. I won't interrupt this to say, can you get the washing in? Are there any questions, or does that make sense what I'm doing? I hope that does.
Love it. But we could take a break if you want to go yell at your husband and
I wouldn't yell, not while you were listening, anyway.
speak to your husband.
I would just gently say, oh, darling, could you possibly? I actually could, literally, I am next to the kitchen, so I'm just going to wave 2 seconds while that dries. It's raining. There, you didn't hear me yell, did you?
That was so civilized.
I'm English, you know. I'm terribly civilized, honestly. When people are listening. Right. So we've got, that's duck number 1. How are we doing? Do say when you're, you know, if you need a break or anything, but that's duck number 1. So we need to pretty much do the same with duck number 2. But I'm going to try and get that nice soft edge between them. So I've got, this is duck number 2, that is sort of a Frankenstein's monster with that second duck. So I'm sort of going to merge those 2 ducks. But because this is wet and I do want them to merge, I'm just going to put in a bit of that body now while it's wet. Just with, again, just with clean water so that I can get a nice sort of lost edge between the 2 of them, because I think that's rather nice. And that water was just enough to stop me getting anything too hard going on. So again, sorry, I know you wanted that on camera, but I'll try. I've got my gamboge, and I'm going to start with the bill again. Leaving some nice little white sort of highlights to show that it's shiny and to show the shape of it. And just come round. And again, we've got that sort of black bit on the end, which we'll pop in at the end. So then with clean water, just pulling some of that away. We can leave some of that sort of clean, and then we can drop in a few little colours, bit of Quin Sienna there, maybe put some. And I'm learning from this bill, you know, I said I thought that had gone all too light and I'd have to go and put the second layer on. So over here, I'm going to try and use slightly sort of gutsier colours so that I can do more of it in one layer. Because generally, the fewer strokes you do in watercolour, the better it is. You know, it stays fresher, cleaner, more vibrant. So I'm going to come up to its eye here trying to keep that all important little highlight. And then coming round it. And then with that clean water, letting some of that come away. Oh, that's a nice mark. You see, watercolour just does such beautiful things for you. Such a lovely medium. We were talking before everyone turned up about whether, you know, I used acrylics or whether people did. And I have to say, I just love watercolour so much. You just couldn't do sort of these sorts of mark, or it would, yes, of course, you could do them in other media, but watercolour just does it for you. And being intrinsically a rather lazy person at heart, I love the fact that a little bit of water, a little bit of paint, and if you trust it to do its thing, it just makes such beautiful marks for you. So I'm dropping in a bit of Prussian blue here and letting that go for a little walk. A little bit of the yellow from the beak has gone up into the head, but I'm not going to worry about that. I am just going to be careful coming down here to try and do this. Oop, not overly successful, but there you go. And then let's come down, as we did before, to that lovely chest. And again, I just need to be careful going round the bill because it could all merge a bit too much. And then coming back that way. So even though I'm doing this, I need to just be aware of what's going on over here as this dries. And I'm quite happy with those little feathery marks I've got going on. So that's good. Because obviously if they hadn't worked and I didn't like them, then potentially I need to do something different on this duck. So there's no point doing all the same on them and getting to the end of duck number 3 and thinking, oh, I don't like that. So you're kind of learning as you go along and just aware of what's happening. I think it'd be rather nice if some of that blue there could come for a little walk down into its chest. I know in a real duck there isn't any of that blue there, but these are my ducks, so I can do that. And I am going to just tilt my paper a bit because that's the problem of working flat. And I'm just letting some of that blue just come down into there. I might also just put a tiny bit of, this is just ordinary table salt. Oops, that has totally gone hard in the box. I might just put a tiny bit just to introduce a different mark and a little feathery mark, see what happens there. I mean, you know, using salts is always a bit hit and miss because when you want it to behave itself and do beautiful things, it doesn't. And sometimes, you know, it does exactly what you want. But again, no problem. If it doesn't, we'll come up with a solution. So just going to introduce some of that colour to sort of paint a bit of the shadow there. That's maybe a little bit too much, so I'm just going to stop that with the tissue and just move that around. Again, not totally happy with that. But I like how these two are kind of merging into there. This looks very clunky at the moment. I think I'm going to have to work on that, but it's too wet. A bit too much green is coming down into that bill, but I'm not going to panic and I can go back and sort that out later. And this mark here that needs to be a smoother edge, which is tricky when it's wet. I like how some of the yellow of that bill, can you see how it's escaping and coming down into the chest? I really like that. So maybe I will encourage that and put a bit more in there. And that's another, you know, I just love watercolour because it does things for you. and you have to think whether you like it or not. And if you control the water, then you're halfway towards controlling the paint. The water is infinitely more important than the paint in my view. So again, I'm coming down here. I'm going to just let some of that orange go up where it's reflected underneath. And maybe I'll use my rigger, except I've lost, oh no, I haven't lost it. I'm a bit embarrassed at the state of this brush. All the paint's fallen off the handle. I'm always saying to people, oh, you must look after your brushes, you must look after your paints. And then when you look at my paints and my brushes, they're in a dreadful state. But I know the theory. So the rigger, I think, is a lovely brush because it encourages you to do a really loose mark. You can't be overly precise with it simply because the hairs are too long. So this foot here, there's not a lot going on there. And then, you know what I was saying about the scales on this leg, you can see them quite clearly on this photo. So that's what I'm trying to capture, is the sort of scales and shine on that leg. And I'm just doing that with my rigger, putting marks down, and then with clean water again, just connecting them, maybe letting some of that colour sort of flow. Might drop another, this is a bit of that gamboge. And then the leg can come down into that lovely pigeon toe that I said I liked. So we've got that going on, and then might introduce a bit more pink into this toe. And then we've got, and if these 2 feet sort of merge a bit, I'm quite happy with that. I really like lost edges because I think a little bit of ambiguity in your painting gets the viewer to start to engage with the painting, because if it's all there, they look at it and they think, oh yeah, that's nice, or oh yes, that's gorgeous, but there's not necessarily a reason to look a second time if it's all there first. So it's quite nice to leave a little bit of ambiguity so that they can work out what's going on and sort of almost feel rewarded for the fact that they have worked out sort of that these 2 feet are overlapping or whatever. Love how that pink has travelled up the leg into the body. So I might just encourage a little bit more of that pink to go for a bit of a walk. Let's see. If we come back, can you see how the salt has worked a little bit here? It's still too wet in the head. I am going to put another little bit, a few taps of water into there to see what's going to happen. I do like how that pink has gone up under its belly there, so that's good. Just as we softened off a bit of the edges here with the spray bottle, I'm going to do that here. I need to be very careful because this is a bit too wet. I think if I spray now, I could end up with an explosion. And I'm not sure that an exploding duck's head is quite what we're after. No, it is too wet. So what you can do if you need to manage, the amount of water on the paper is just sort of screw up the end of a bit of kitchen towel and then sort of just wick away some of that, because I was concerned it was going to spill over. And much as I like these soft marks, I didn't particularly want that sort of dribbling over into there. So let's do that. I would love to sort out that eye, because that eye is really annoying me. I just didn't like the shape of it. So, and I have managed to lose the highlight, which is annoying. So I'll need to go back in right at the end say with some gouache. I'll pretend that I lost the highlight on purpose just to show you what to do. It wasn't my incompetence.
A great teacher.
I know, it's lovely because I say things like, oh yes, with clean water, and of course my water's dirty just so that you can see it on the camera. It's not that I'm using this awful water. Oh dear. So I just would love to spray this because but not too much. I just want a little soft edge there, so I think that might be enough. And we have a couple of ducks on the go. So now we can come down to this front duck while this is all wet, because it might be quite nice to get a bit of, again, merging going on. So that's why you need to sort of be ready to go so that you can be quite sort of spontaneous. On this one, I am going to go for the eyes first. And again, it's no more than a circle with a little highlight that I will endeavour to keep this time. And just coming round, a bit of clean water and then letting some of that go down. Let's get a decent sized brush, not that little brush. So on this photo, the head looks incredibly purple, but I think it would look really bizarre to have a purple headed duck when I've got two green headed ducks. So again, I'm just going to sort of follow the colorway of, say, this duck, because obviously each photo as it's taken, you know, the lighting is different and maybe it is a different breed of duck, but you know, again, it's up to us to make the photo our own, just as we were talking about at the beginning. So I'm coming round here. Oh, a bit of his foot has sort of bled into that head. Can you see the pink is making a bit of an effort to get into the head? So I could push it back. If I didn't like it, all I can use is kitchen towel and just push it back. But actually, I don't have a problem with that. So we'll keep an eye on it and make sure it doesn't sort of get silly, but I'll probably just leave that be. So I'm dropping a little bit of blue in, and then I think maybe a bit of that lovely green gold would be fun here. I'm just letting that merge, but not too much. And then we've got his second cheek, his far cheek here is quite separate. Oops, so let's just do that. Okay. So I'm going to let that dry off a bit and do his body and then come to the beak down here, because I'm a little bit concerned that if I do that beak, all this green will whoosh into it like it did up there. And I don't have a problem with it up there, but I do think I'd like this beak to be a bit cleaner because it's closer to us. So we'll get, oh, that's a bit too purple. So adding a bit more of that Quin Gold into my dark mix to make it a bit browner. Leaving that lovely white mark around its neck. And then we've got, again, this sort of comes up here, trying to sort of stroke the duck. Now here, I have left that white, which I didn't kind of fully intend to, but actually I rather like the fact that it's joined here and then we've got a bit of separation. So I think I will leave that. So it's really important to be aware of what's happening. If you like it, leave it. And if you don't, do something about it so that you evolve and make most of any sort of happy accidents, but you're in charge. So then we've got these sort of markings around here. Again, the actual sort of body is just a sort of fairly mushy colour. So if I put some mushy coloured water on, we'll get the leg to come up and do that beautiful orange undercolour, and we'll just encourage a little bit of this to flow and see what it does for us. And saying if we don't like it, that's fine, but if we do, it will be lovely. And can you see I've just joined it on, and some of that purple from the top is coming for a little walk down into the body, which I like. I'm going to drop a little more yellow. I'll sort that shape out because I didn't like that. And I'm not sure if I like that shape. So we'll do that. And then we'll come on to the feet and say, I'm just watching what's going on here. And that's all right, but it's still very, very wet. So we'll do just what we did before with the rigger, some nice scales across. And then down into that foot. And then I reckon, because there's enough moisture in there, if I just join that on, some of that purpley colour might go for a little bit of a wander down the leg, which I rather like. And we've got this here. And then over into that toe. And then maybe drop in a few more. That's a bit of the permanent rose just going in there. And we want some of that permanent rose to come up under the, into the underbelly so that it's sort of reflected the colour of the feet. And let's just do the webbing. And that's just clean water, picking up the excess paint and sort of coming in from the toes. They all look a bit messy at the moment, but we'll be okay. Let's strengthen some of that. And then again, just putting its little claws in. Some of that could maybe come up and form a bit of a shadow. I'm going to pull that down because I didn't like the shape at the top of the leg. Just think it needed to be a bit thicker. Maybe a little bit more of that permanent rose just to do those scaly toes. Okay. Now I'm conscious of how this is drying, and if I want to soften off the edge here, I need to do it now. So we'll just do that. Like what's happening up here, can you see what's happening on the back of that head? I like, so I'm going to leave that alone, but just keep monitoring it. I'm looking back at duck number 1, and you can see how much lighter it's all dried, which is annoying always, because you paint it and you think, oh, what gorgeous colours, and then of course it dries and you think, oh, that's a bit disappointing. So we'll have to come back and strengthen that. I'm going to encourage a little bit of the green to go for a walk here as well. Again, I know that in a real duck there isn't any green there, but I don't care. I just need to sort out the shape around here because that was looking a bit unpleasant. While it's drying, I'm just going to drop in a little bit more of clean water to see if we can get some nice blooms going on, and those looking pretty good. Isn't it lovely when it does it? Because sometimes you do it and it just, the paint sits and looks at you, sort of as if to say, you think I'm going to behave? But today that is behaving. So, well, at the moment, it can always stop. So I'm coming round here on this lovely, I really like the pose of this foot, how it sort of all folded up with the webs. So, sorry, I'm looking at the reference. Can you see that? I just like foot off the ground and it's sort of folded up just before it sort of out stretches again. So I want to try and capture that. I'm using a bit of this Quin Sienna with my rigger brush. Let's drop in, I'm dropping in a bit of, that's, ooh, I'm going to say that's the Quin Gold, but it's a very mucky Quin Gold because I've got some purple in there. I'm going to just sort of pull that, and then this one is, this toe is here. And then there's sort of a flap of the webbing showing. So we just pull that together. And then get those little claws in again. So we've got 1, 2, 3. Now, what I have to decide is what I'm going to do at the top of the foot. I'm half tempted actually to leave it almost separate because our eyes would join up the dots, but I think maybe not. So I am going to sort of join that on. Need to sort that out and just have it like that, I reckon. And then join that foot onto the body, because at the moment it was just sort of hanging in midair, which is not a good place for it to be. I really like how this pink has just come up into the body, so I can make sure I don't interfere with that too much. And I love this, I mean, this green is really pushing. I mean, it's a phthalo green, so it is a very pushy colour. I don't know whether you agree, but I think all the paints have real personalities, and phthalo would be, you know, they're the one that's sort of at the front of the class putting up a hand saying, pick me. And it sort of does, it is very pushy, which is fine on occasions, but can be very annoying on other occasions. So we might give it a little push back. And now I'm hoping we can just get on to this little bill right at the front, because this is still wet, but it's not puddled anymore. So I think we should be safe. If it all explodes in a horrible mess, then obviously we'll sort it out. I want some merging. Actually, my gamboge, as you can see, has got an awful lot of green in it. I've been very mucky on my palette. But I'll pretend that's what I wanted. So what I do want to do is round the front of the bill, they've sort of almost got a little ridge. And I want to sort of try and capture that, and then we'll go back and put the dark sort of mark back in. And I'm also remembering I haven't put it back there, so it might be quite nice to capture a little highlight. So I could just lift off a bit of colour so that I've got a bit of a highlight there, which I like. And then maybe just bringing some colour in. I'm slightly emphasising the shape of this bill more than there, so that I want it to feel like it's really coming at you. Sort that out. Yeah, I think that's going to be okay. So let's go back and put that mark, because this, I was going to say that's dry enough, but I'm not sure it is. Yeah. take off a bit of that. And I'll have to wait for that to dry. So, right, we have 3 ducks at the moment. I'm just going to join those bits up. And I need to let this dry because I need to assess what I've got. So what do I like? What do I hate? What am I going to do about it? And I want to get rid of some of those pencil marks as well. So I need to sort of hair dryer this. Can I check what the time is? So
About a half hour or so?
pardon?
About a half hour, 45 minutes
How do you mean?
to go.
Oh, to go. Sorry. Yes. Sorry. Sorry. It's 7 o'clock here. And I'm just looking and thinking, oh, how many hours am I meant to be taking off? Sorry, my brain was definitely not computing at that point. Right. So I'm
Liz,
going to hair.
So
Oh.
there's another question. Does the cellulose paper encourage more running? I'm not sure what cellulose paper she's referring to, but.
Well, this, because it's a very hard sized paper, so it's not particularly absorbent, which is what I like because I want the paint to stay on the surface and move around. So if you were using a very soft paper, like say a khadi paper, do you have khadi paper, the Indian sort of handmade paper? Do you know khadi?
I don't know that term.
No, it's, sorry, just, well, it's almost like blotting paper. So if you have that sort of very soft sized paper, everything will absorb and it's really hard to get paint to move. Whereas on this, because it's quite hard sized, it will stay on the surface and you can get some of these beautiful movements and marks. So again, different papers just encourage a different way of working. And, you know, if you find a paper that you like, then stick with it. But if you get stuck in a rut, I would always suggest trying a new paper because it will encourage you to work in a different way and you might discover something new. Sorry, just while we're talking, I'm just putting in a few dots of clean water just to encourage a few more marks because I really liked what was going on there. So I was doing more of it. Whereas this poor duck at the back has ended up really a bit blobby. So I'm just going to pull some of that off to make a bit of a highlight to try and give it a bit more shape to its head. And I'm just going to pull off a bit of that mark as well. So I'm going to hair dry this. Zoom should cut the hair dryer noise out, I hope. But I'll just give it a bit of a blast and then we can look at it, work out what we like, what needs to be adjusted, and we'll go from there. Is that okay?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. Of course, when you're drying, you do need to be careful because again, I've got so much water around the back of this duck that I will have an exploding duck's bottom, which is not what I want. So in that case, you can just pull off a bit of that water just to, again, control things. Right. So I'm sure you all know, but you should use the back of your hand to see whether it's dry. Just if it still feels cool, there's water in the paper. So this area is still a bit damp. This one's fine. That's okay. So I think we'll be okay. I mean, obviously when you rub out any lines and things like that on a damp paper, there's a danger of scuffing the surface and taking that off. So I'll need to be careful. So I'm just got a white plastic eraser, and I'm just going to take these lines out. I know some people like pencil lines showing through in their compositions. I don't. So I would like some sort of illusion that I did this all spontaneously. So I try and get rid of as much pencil as possible. And to be honest, I would usually have done the pencil a lot lighter. I tried to do it a bit heavier so that it would show up on the camera. But, you know, needs must. Definitely want to get rid of this line, but I'm just a bit concerned. It's a bit damp round here. And I don't want to rip the paper. Right. And that's got rid of the worst. So at this, so I would say we're sort of 85% of the way there. And then it's very much a case of working out what you're happy with, what you hate, what you really need to fix, what you need to sort of emphasize, and how you're going to pull it together. So if I was looking at this, I'm quite happy with their feet, really like the feet. His eye has gone horrible, and actually all their eyes are a bit horrible, which is really ironic given I started this demonstration with a demonstration of eyes. So isn't that ironic? But never mind, such is life. Hopefully we can sort that out. So feet, I'm not going to fiddle with, I hope. I like these marks that we got with the water. I think they just give an impression of feathers going on. Say the eyes are yucky. I do want to emphasize the bill. Now you can, I think the duck's bills have improved. I like this bill, and I love actually that his foot color has fed into the bill. So I'm quite happy with that. I really like, say, that mark around the back of his head, which is quite ambiguous. You know, I know there isn't a hole in that duck's head, but I quite like it. So I think if my priority should be to sort out these eyes and emphasize a bit more colour on these bills, and then work on the background. So that is what I need to do now to start sort of. Yeah.
Question, please. So the green areas to the right of the two back ducks' heads bother me a little bit. I would like them a lot pushed back a little more. They're too. Yes, they're competing with the heads, in my opinion. So what are you planning on doing anything with those?
I would plan on probably emphasizing the cheek mark here, I would say. I quite don't mind this one being a bit fuzzy, and I am going to put more into the background, so that will develop.
Okay.
So you have to kind of suspend belief. You know how every watercolor painting goes through an ugly stage? There's always a point when you, well, maybe it's just me, but when you're painting and you look at it and think, oh my goodness, what is going on here? You just have to have faith that you will come through it. And so if you can just have a bit of faith, I'm going to sort that out. But I don't really say there's always a point when you look at your painting and you think, really? Maybe not. And then hopefully we can resolve that and get through it. So that's kind of what I do in this sort of second layer as such. So I'm going to start over here. I've got a bit of gamboge just to emphasize this, sort this beak out a bit more. And it's really a case of doing pretty much what we did in the first layer and building on top. And, you know, as you know, watercolor is transparent. So the foundation we've got will shine through, but we can sort out and knock back some of these little white marks if we don't like them. I want some of them there to show the shine on the beak, but some of them were a bit clunky and ugly. So we can just sort of sort that out. And then I really need to sort this eye out, and I'm not quite sure. I think the issue is sort of the shape of that head, and I need to sort of pull that down there. Hopefully, Ralph, that will just bring it forward of that sort of mark and just help it stand out a bit more. But when you're doing the second layer, you need to sort of, again, use lots of clean water to merge things in so that it doesn't sort of stand out too much. This cheek over here is a bit weird, but to be honest, and to be fair, if you look at the reference, it is a bit weird. So it looks weird on my painting, but it looks pretty weird on the duck. So I'm going to slightly sort it out like that. I think its eye was a bit too bulbous. And just sort of bring that down, maybe soften that here. Like a little more colour to come down here. So again, I'm just encouraging some of that blue that I've just put on to move outside. And I think that will help. I think it needs a bit more weight around its sort of back. So I'm just going to sort that shape out a little and just balance it up. And I mean, this stage is very much, you know, your judgment of keeping, you know, looking and saying, right, what do I like? What can I do a bit more of? What should I avoid? Because, you know, you don't want to muck up the bits you do like. And we've all done that, thinking, oh, that's nice. Oh, oh, I've just got rid of it. So just pulling a little more colour round him there. Really like this sort of orange underbelly, and I'm just going to bring a bit more up into there. Then on this one, we really need to sort out that mushy eye, don't we? I think I got the shape totally wrong. So let's make that decision before I actually put the brush on the paper. And just see if I can sort of sharpen that up a little. It's quite an evil looking duck, this one, but again, to be fair, my reference photo, he's quite an evil looking duck. So it's not just me making him evil. I do like to sort of try and give my animals personalities, and they sort of talk to me as I paint. So as say, I think about this one looking a bit evil, and he's actually getting ready to peck this one because this one's going for some juicy morsel that's off the bottom. And I just like sort of making up little stories about them in my head. I don't usually articulate them too much because people tend to think you're going a bit mad if you do that. But just adding a little emphasis and a little shape here. But I actually like that sort of where it's gone fuzzy there. Hopefully that's just sharpened that up enough. This isn't terribly important. Oh, I do need to get a nostril in, that would help, because they do have very distinct nostrils. You can just see a tiny bit of the second nostril. So we could sort of just do that and emphasize there. And then if I come forward on this one, again, the highlight on that eye wasn't right. I need to get nostrils in on this one, which will help. That's looking better. And now I need to think. I don't tend to put in any sort of great background on my animals, because I want my animals to be the sort of the star of the show. So I tend just to use little sort of wafts of colour just to sort of create the movement and the direction that I want. If I was doing a background, I would have planned it at the thumbnail stage and probably have done it right at the beginning rather than the end. So again, when I'm sort of doing classes and things, sometimes people get to the end and they say, oh, what should I do with the background? And it's like, well, you kind of should have thought about that 2 hours ago, because it's very hard just to sort of then go back in and sort of create, you know, a background if you haven't actually thought what you're doing and what role the background actually plays in your piece. So I think it's something to really sort of consider, but luckily, as I say, I tend not to use much of a background in my painting. I'm just, because my water is so disgusting. If you could see it, I'm embarrassed. I'm not going to show you the state of my water at this point. So I'm just going to use that spray, because at least that's clean. I think it would be quite nice, having got sort of softer edges here, just to slightly soften off and get a bit of that green to move. Not too much, because I want that to go further and this to be closer to us, but just a little bit of that green to move would be nice.
Liz, we have a question.
Yes, of
You put in
course.
shadows.
Sometimes I'm not particularly bothered with shadows on this one. Again, sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. What I absolutely hate and never do is, oh sorry, I shouldn't say that just in case people do it, is you know, put in a little bit of grass for them to stand on or something like that. I just don't like it and I won't do it. So shadows I do sometimes. I'm not feeling particularly shadowy, because do you remember I said particularly on this one there were very strong shadows of the bills and I decided to leave those off. If I started putting very strong shadows under the ducks, then you're going to start to actually need those to make sense, because it's got to have sort of internal sense to it. So I don't think these are getting shadows. They're just going to get more wafts of colour, and they may end up with a bit of splatter as well.
Also, could you send us the photo of the front duck? I don't think
Of
we
course.
can do that.
No, you didn't have that one. I only sent you the 2 because I only found him. I knew I wanted to do 3 because, of course, 3s are a lovely balance number. Actually, I mean, 2 as a duo wouldn't have been an issue, but I did want to do 3, and it took me a while to find the duck that I liked. I do have a vast collection of photos that I've found, but sometimes you still sometimes struggle to find exactly the one you want. So at this point, you're getting towards the end, and it is always better to stop too soon rather than too late, because if I looked at this tomorrow and thought, oh, if only I'd done so and so, well, of course I can do it, But if I look at it tomorrow and think, oh, I wish I hadn't done whatever it is, undoing stuff from watercolour is a lot harder. So especially if you've been painting for a couple of hours, I personally would always suggest putting it to one side and sleeping on it, to say, right, is it finished? Do I need to do more? What do I need to do? And you look with fresh eyes, and hopefully you then think, the secret is whatever. So I just need to sharpen that bit up. That. And if something is bothering me, sometimes you can't work out what it is that's wrong. I will often prop a picture up just on the mantelpiece or on the side in the kitchen or wherever, and sort of look at it out of the corner of my eye as I walk past. And, 2 days' time, it'll suddenly, I'll realise that the problem was whatever it was. Whereas you could sort of sit and puzzle about it and get cross about it, and that wouldn't help anybody. So less is more. I'm just going to sharpen this up round here a bit, because it's got sort of wing round the back there. So I do think it's important to know when to stop with your watercolours. And as I say, if you've sort of been working for a while and starting to be tired, then it's, what's the point of mucking it up? It's just very frustrating. So I think you will always hear people say, don't fiddle, stop too soon rather than too late. Put your brush down. I have physically taken brushes away from people when they're not listening to me. Like, stop.
Put your brush down.
Well, and it's so easy because you do it yourself. Because equally well, I hear myself say things like, don't fiddle. And then I look what I'm doing. And as I'm talking, I'm fiddling away merrily. And we all know it's, these things are easy to say, but not necessarily to do. So as we're talking here, I am fiddling away merrily, just to sort of build up a bit more colour. And I'm thinking I actually want some blue to come off here. Oh, that is so dirty. That's embarrassing. You didn't see that, did you? No, go on.
With the camera.
Oh, it was disgusting. This is where I need a lovely assistant that could rush off and get me some clean water. But sadly, my lovely assistant isn't here. In fact, but I can treat myself to a new bit of kitchen towel, perhaps, rather than that sort of damp, disgusting bit that I was using. So this is what I mean by a waft of colour. I'm just letting the water take out and balance up colours in a few different places. Again, this is not the time to be introducing a new colour. I said at the beginning, I love to plan my colours so that they're harmonious. I, again, sometimes see people they've just bought a new colour. They've treated themselves to that horribly expensive Daniel Smith's colour or whatever. And they get to halfway through or to the end of a painting and suddenly realise they haven't used it. So they plonk it in because it's new. And that's never a good thing, I would suggest. I just realised I haven't done this front one's little mark on his bill. So I need to do that, hopefully relatively carefully. And I want to keep that sort of little ridge and that shine. I'm just going to sort of join those up so it's a bit paler, I hope. Maybe just lift a bit off. Right. So I think we're getting fairly much to where I want this to go. I've been very mucky because my water pots have been up here and I've got some little splots that have happened. And you can either worry about splots, and people really do, particularly when you're working in pen and wash. But I always say that one or two splots will look like a mistake. If you do a few more, it looks like you actually intended it. So just, you know, if you end up with splots somewhere that, and I know I'm not going to be able to lift these because I've chosen so many staining colours, but if I just put a few more in, no one will know that I didn't do those on purpose. And if you don't tell them, I won't tell them, so that's fine. It's our little secret. Just you, me and YouTube, that's fine. So I think I would say, and I also do this, I always say, oh, I think that's finished, and then I carry on because I just want to bring that one. But I think this is probably gone as far as it's going at this point. I'm just going to blend that in so it doesn't look too obvious. And I would again say stand back from your work so that you can see it, because especially because I'm working flat here and I've been sitting down, I might get a hideous surprise when I stand up, but hopefully not. If you have lost any highlights, this would be the point. I've got a little pot of just white gouache here to put some. Again, I try and avoid it because gouache stands out. You know, it's far better to retain the white of the paper, but, you know, if needs must, that's what we're going to do. I'm just thinning it down because it's dried a bit. I'm just putting a bit in there. I need to sort out around that eye. That needs to be dry, so I'm just going to do a quick hair dry. I just want to put the tiniest bit there and just maybe, oh, that wasn't quite dry. Well, that just teach me to rush things. So I'm just picking out a couple of sort of bits where maybe I've lost a little of the structure. I believe a lot of the watercolour societies in America are terribly strict about things like using gouache. So
some are. I think the Transparent Watercolor Society doesn't allow it, but others are a little more.
Are they a little more forgiving?
Yeah, small C Catholic, I guess. I don't know. Certainly, the San Diego Watercolor Society uses all sorts of water media. So
yeah, no, it just I see, because I belong to sort of various, you know, forums on various, you know, websites and things, and I see comments from sort of Americans saying, oh, you can't do this, and you guys seem to be really strict. I'm not aware, like, you know, the Royal Watercolor Society, which is, you know, not bad. Yeah, they certainly allow it. And it, yeah, just funny how different. My view is, you know, if it works for you, then it's right. I just don't believe in sort of rules for the sake of it. But sorry, and I'm just going to sort this eye out because that's yucky too. You know, it totally should be what achieves. You know, what were you trying to communicate through your painting? If you achieve that using, you know, bleach and salt and a bit of household emulsion and a bit of gloss paint that you found at the back of the shed, then I'm happy with that, because I think art is all about communication. It's not about being pure and right and following the rules, but that's me. So, you know, if you disagree with that, then please do please do disagree, but I just think that you need to, it's all about what you're trying to communicate in your art and what makes you happy. And if you want to suddenly, you know, splatter white gouache everywhere, that's fine. I would say, you know, go careful, because splattering white gouache might just make your painting look like it's got a nasty case of chicken pox. You know, think why you're doing it and whether it helps. So I've just emphasising, you can see here, I'm just bringing a little more colour into the feet because I liked the feet, but I felt that they were looking a bit flat now. So I've just brought in sort of 3 places, because always 3s just work, you know, beautifully. So if you do something in one place, it's good to echo it elsewhere. And I think I'm going to stop at this point. I don't know whether you know, whether this is still upsetting you, Ralph. If it is, sorry, tough.
You've pushed it back by pulling the head forward there, and so
Exactly.
it's not quite as annoying.
Not quite as annoying. Still annoying, but not quite. It's lovely how polite you are. I like it, so I don't care. Because I say I want more of an emphasis on this front one anyway. So I am happy that is a bit more mushy.
Yes, I think the more intense colors on the front one there versus the slightly more muted ones, the slightly drier ones on the back ducks, it really sells it. And then the textures are wonderful.
So, I mean, if I had longer, it might be that I would go and just emphasize a few things, but I'm not sure, because you always have to say to yourself, you know, at this point, you really should be questioning each brush stroke. You know, is this going to make it better, or am I just filling the time? You know, if you're at your art class or whatever, you know, are you just spending the time because it's half an hour till you're allowed a cup of tea, or is it because it's actually adding something? So, you know, if you can achieve something in half an hour and it's what you wanted to communicate, you stop then. If you can achieve something in a week by doing layer after layer after layer, and that's what you want to communicate, then that's what you do. So I think you have to be questioning yourself all the time. But I am going to say that there's a really nasty mark just there, and I'm going to scrub it to try and get rid of it, because it was just catching my eye. You probably couldn't see it on the camera, but it was really annoying. Just there. So I would then look, I'd always look afterwards, and I just mentally say to myself, right, what do I like? What don't I like? What would I do different if I was doing this again? And I really like this line here, wiggling where that foot is. So I like that. I like this unresolved bit round the back of his head. I think maybe it's getting a bit mushy here, which I don't like. I do like these textures, you know, and at some point you could even ask yourself a question, actually, do I not like this duck particularly? How would it look if I cropped my picture and turned it into something totally different? Can you see where I put my hands?
Yes.
You could, you know, as I say, there is nothing wrong with taking a pair of scissors to your painting and say, actually, I think that is possibly a more successful picture than that. Do you see what I mean? So, you know, if you thought that, then that's what you do. You take it and turn it into what you want. It's always worth just doing. But as I say, look, I'm fiddling and being naughty, just like I told you not to, just because that was emphasizing. So, in fact, I do really like that as a composition. So if I did this again, I think I might sort of push that one further back and pull this further forward, oh, excuse me, and emphasize that diagonal. And that could be an idea for a future painting. So it's quite nice to look at what you've got, and it gives you further ideas. You say, right, you know, okay, that was good, that wasn't good. If I do this again, I'll do more of. And the other bit I do like, again, I'm not sure if is the colours in the belly here. I think that's really lovely. So if I was doing ducks again, I think I would encourage some of that without going so strong that it's got a rainbow sort of belly on it. But I think that is probably more successful than, say, the underside of this one. I might need to sort out that leg a little, but it's still wet, so I'm not going to. Anyway, so that would be my sort of final process, is so that I am constantly learning and I'm constantly getting new ideas for another painting. So you get to this point, rather than thinking, oh, I hate it, or oh, I love it, just think, right, what could I do differently? What is good? What is bad? What could I do more of? And actually even saying, I've obviously dropped some water on this duck's bill here, and I've ended up with a little hard mark there. Well, ducks and water are good. So maybe that would give me the idea of, oh, next time I could let it totally dry and then sprinkle it with water and get those sorts of watermarks rather than the soft cauliflower watermarks. And that would give the idea that they've just come out of the water and they've got water droplets on them. Oh, that might be something interesting to do. So each little mark can sort of spark off a new thought and a new direction. And I think that's really nice to be constantly learning and constantly evolving what you're doing.
Well, Liz, I'd like to thank you very much for this excellent presentation. And I'd like to let everybody unmute themselves and join in the congratulations if you like.
We love this. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. No, my pleasure. Has anyone got any questions that I can help with, or?
Well, I just love how you kept so much of the white in the picture too, because I sort of painted along a little sketch when you're going, and mine filled in so much, and it's so much more alive and so much more interesting with all those whites.
I think, yeah, the white is, I mean, it gives a rhythm and a pattern to things, and once you've lost the white, you know, it is hard to regain it. So, you know, for example, I do like that white there and that white. Oh, sorry, you can't see.
Yeah, I can see.
Oh, you can. Good. Sorry,
Yes, we can.
something you didn't know that, because it's those little sparkles that just bring some life into your watercolor. So, you know, if you don't like the white, you can always cover it up. But
Well, even the highlight on the front duck's beak is so cool. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Thank you so much. I really love it. It's so transparent and the colors just blend so well.
Well, it's just lovely. I mean, watching the colours just move in the water is, I just find it fascinating, because they do have personalities, and you find ones that's really pushy and they have a little fight, and, you know, again, you sort of almost see a little story develop on the paper. So using enough water to set your watercolours free, I think, is a really positive thing to do.
Thank you. Great.
I have a
colors.
question. This is Anne. So a lot of times I've had people tell me you need to ground your objects, like your ducks, and, you know, a lot of times it's done with a shadow or just darkness underneath. And, you know, yours don't really look like they're floating. They seem grounded, but yet you didn't do that. So is there a technique I'm missing or not understanding that kind of helps you get them grounded without some of the obvious strategies?
I think as long as you've got some weight under them. I mean, I say the thing that I just loathe is the idea of, like, you know, 10 little blades of grass to give them to stand thing to stand on, and you do see that, and I just don't like it. So I think that the wafts of colour that you put on actually somehow just sort of does ground them, rather than needing anything overly specific. It's a good question, and I'm not sure what the answer is, but I say I prefer mine to be floating than to be standing on a blade of grass, just because we've got something to stand on. I mean, but you know, when you look at your painting, and you know if it needs something or not, because if they do look like they're sort of helium balloons about to float away, then you need to hoik them back down to the earth. But I don't think they particularly do, so I would leave them as they are. But if I'd looked at them and thought, oh dear, then I would have, yes, at that point thought about shadow, or even just a bit of splatter to maybe to sort of emulate some gravel or whatever. But I hope they're okay at the moment.
I just think you must do it by magic then, Liz.
Nothing magic, it's only water, isn't it? Nothing magic at all.
Did you
Sure,
use,
that's what Harry Potter said too.
Sorry, say that again?
Harry Potter used that line, I think.
Yes, oh wonderful, love Harry Potter.
Do you prefer to paint animals, or do you have other subjects that you really love?
My total passion is animals. Yeah, I keep thinking I should grow up and do something sort of sensible and grown up, like landscapes or whatever. But I just love animals. I do really enjoy urban sketching as well. So I do really enjoy sort of buildings and the sort of man-made environment. Almost sort of that's my relaxation, whereas animals are my work. And I also love portraits, because I reckon, you know, if I can paint a purple cow, I can paint a purple person. So I've done quite a lot of portrait painting, but landscapes just don't really interest me that much, which is really, I think if I lived in a different place, I would be more inspired by my surroundings. But where I live here, it's very pretty, but it's a bit blur.
Where you live?
I live in Berkshire in the south of England, so it's
Lovely.
it's very pretty. But if I lived in the Peak District, or if I lived in Scotland and there were some good dramatic mountains, I think I would be a lot more inspired by landscape, and then I think my art would change. I'm sure it would change with my environment, because I tend to paint animals that I know and see. I mean, not specifically, I do not know this duck, but we have a pond in the village that have plenty of ducks, so I know them and I know their personalities. I don't tend to paint, you know, I saw some gorgeous birds from, I think it was Louisiana. I saw them on Facebook, and they were rose spoonbills. They were like the flamingos of Louisiana, except they weren't flamingos. They were bright pink. Anyway, whatever these birds are, they were stunning, but I wouldn't paint them because they're not my experience. They're not, you know, I don't, until someone in Louisiana invites me over for a holiday, I'm not going to paint those lovely spoonbills, even though they were stunning, because I don't understand them. They're not part of me. So I do like to relate to what I'm painting. Sorry, that was a very long answer.
Liz, could you recap your paper again? I thought that I heard it was cellulose 200 pound. Is that correct?
Yes, so it's 200 pounds, and it's say the make is Bockingford, which is a cellulose paper. It's a what we call a knot surface, so that's your cold press surface, and it's just quite hard sized. I mean, I don't know whether you do you get arches or
Yes.
sorry,
Yes.
yeah, and
Yes.
I mean that behaves in quite a similar way, but at about 3 times the price. So I just find this a really good practice paper, but it is archival. So, you know, it's perfect if you're doing something and it all turns out good, then it's you know, great. It's very saleable as well. So it's it's a nice paper.
Does it have a slick sort of surface then, more like a hot press or like
No,
hot press?
no, it's a cold press surface. So texture wise, it's a cold press, but it's just quite hard size. So you know the sizing on the paper affects the absorbency. So you can have a very soft size paper, and I say it'll all soak in and it'll be hard to do any wet in wet, or very hard sized and it will just skid around on the surface, a bit like Yupo paper or something. This is quite hard, but it's not that hard. So it's just really nice for wet in wet work, because it gives you time to let that paint move and do its thing.
Have you ever used Fabriano Artistico?
Yes, I have, and I really don't like it.
I've never used it, so I wonder, because I thought that was supposed to be very forgiving as well and didn't dry as fast or something.
I don't find it that forgiving. I went to a workshop at the Royal Watercolour Society, and very kindly they provided all the paper, and it was Fabriano, and it was horrible. So I kind of got my paper out of my bag and used that, because I just didn't get on with it. I'm trying to think what it was I didn't like about it. It was almost too hard. It was a bit scratchy. You know, it's such a tactile thing, painting. You know, you feel the flow of the water, and it just was a bit scratchy and not nice. I didn't like it. I did take a few sheets home afterwards because they were giving it away, but I didn't enjoy it.
The heads, the greens that you used, did you use a stainer green?
Yeah, it's a phthalo green. I used, let me have a look. Let me just check what I used. Yeah, just a phthalo green. So it is a very staining colour, bit like a hooker's green. So all these colours are really staining. If I wanted to lift any of this, I would be stuffed, really. I couldn't, you know, none of this colour is going anywhere.
Right. Because most of the colors you use are all transparent.
They are.
In the greens.
Oh no, the green it's transparent, but it's a staining. So the transparency is about the pigment and how the light travels through it, whereas the staining is whether it sinks into the paper and you can't lift it.
Okay.
So no, they're all very transparent, and sadly they're also very staining. You know, like Prussian blue is a nightmare, isn't it? If you ever need to try and get rid of it, it's strong colour and it just sinks into the paper and holds on for all it's worth.
Okay, thank you.
Pleasure.
All right, thank you very much. I think we should let you go and have your supper or whatever you're having tonight.
Well, I hope there might be a supper waiting for me. That would be nice, because yes, it's almost 8 o'clock here.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.